Okay, we are starting a new project, and this is the second time I'm going to try a video like this. We are doing a massive putting green here, and you can see the boys have already started by just ripping out all of the base material. So we are making sure we get rid of all that organic matter until we kind of hit that clay, so we don't have any decomposition. You can see right away we are starting with a base of a quarter clear. Actually, it's a 3/4 clear, and this is just a rock that has no grains in it, so water can just drain through super easily. You can even see here we go from the 3/4 clear to a 3/4 minus, and what happens here is there's actual fines. Like, that's kind of like your gravel texture, so you can see it packs a whole lot differently. It starts to kind of fill in all those gaps. So we actually use a 3/4 minus a whole lot here. So we actually have to raise our putting green roughly 12 inches in some spots and 18 inches in others. So we are packing in 1-inch layers here. Sometimes it's even smaller because we want to make sure there is no settling. So we got to go in the finest layers over and over. You can see Brad going back and forth with that plate compactor. He's just hitting it every which direction, so we make sure we have the perfect base. So while he goes over it on the bottom tier of our putting green, see, our green actually has 2 tiers. Actually, it ended up having 3. He'd be at the bottom packing everything down, then I'd be at the top spreading more gravel, and then vice versa. We'd switch back and forth, so we just keep on packing. Now, we actually ended up doing about 2 inches, and then we put a heavy landscape fabric over the top of our gravel base. So this was the most expensive landscape fabric you can find. There's no light going through that thing, so there will be no weeds coming up under our turf. Speaking of turf, here it is. So this stuff came from Arizona. We had to unload it ourselves. It was heavy, really heavy, but I'll tell you more about it as we get further into the video. So we legitimately worked on base forever. So you can see us here, we're actually using a laser level. We're going around making sure all of our slopes are right, all of our tiers are properly at the proper height, because we need to make sure water drains down and make sure there's no sitting water in any low spots. Like, we gotta treat this base like a patio, because we don't want any spots of the putting green to hold water. That would be problematic. Other thing you can see going on here, we actually made this putting green a little difficult for ourselves. So we have Chilton edging going in around the outside, and we also have Chilton natural stone, dry stack stone block going on in the middle. So we actually are creating an island that the green will go around. And the hard thing about the Chilton is it's a natural stone, so we have way more cuts to make. And those cuts take a really long time. On top of that, Chilton, you know, the stuff that Brad's doing along the far, or the side closest to us, that is the hardest stuff to lay. Along with this block, you can see Drew and I going at it. This little baby retaining wall ended up taking us 2.5 to 3 days to build. And it was only 4 or 5 tiers, we'll find out here. And it's because you gotta level every single one. And usually, you know, if you're doing a block wall with concrete, your base is the hardest one to lay. In this scenario, when you're doing natural dry stack stone, your base is actually the easiest, and it gets harder and harder as you go up, because we don't concrete our dry stack walls, because we don't want water to get into that concrete and pop and ruin the blocks. So we actually do it all natural. We actually lay our stone. We actually put little shims in there just to make it all perfect. So you can see we have most of the island in, pretty darn close, and then we have the Chilton all the way around the outside, which is sweet. So we're still packing in more and more layers because we needed to keep going up. And once again, it's laying a little bit, packing a little bit, laying a little bit, packing a little bit. Now that we're kind of towards our top here, right? We are actually in the process of screening this. So what we do is we actually took 1-inch poles, and these are steel, and we'd lay them out. We put rock over these 1-inch poles, and then we'd screen it. So we'd grab a 2x4 and we'd pull it back so it's nice and level. because we need to keep making this base more and more level as we got closer and closer to our finished grade. You can see the materials actually changed here. We went from 3/4 clear to 3/4 minus, and now we're at a 2- crushed granite. So this stuff's even more fine. So this is kind of allowing us to make it more and more smooth without any little baby rocks coming through. Because if we did a 3/4 minus, you'd find that some of the 3/4 minus would actually pop up and you could feel it under the turf, which would be problematic if you have a golf ball rolling. Now, we made sure we did things that involve Chilton everywhere. So like we have Chilton steppers here going in, and whenever you do a Chilton stepper, it's always nice to have natural rock around it. So we did a 2 to 4 inch river rock because that looks real clean, real rustic, and real cool. You know, back to the Chilton, you saw those steppers go in. Always make sure you lay your steppers higher than finished grade, so when you add a rock, it can kind of fit in between the cracks there. If you didn't make sure you leave yourself a nice solid gap, your rock is going to overflow onto your steppers, and that's not a very nice customer experience when they're walking and tripping over rocks. We installed a bunch of plants here, so they like the clean look. We have proper spacing. It's very linear around the putting green. We have the same amount of spacing through the entire thing. We have very clean plants. Carl Foresters, Globe Arborvitaes, Boxwoods, let's see, Calmer Birches. Yeah, that's what we got in there. Sunkiss Arborvitaes, Blue Fescues. It's all clean. This is the final step here before laying the turf on the putting green. So you can actually see we laid an aggregate limestone for very fine, like the stuff you see on a baseball field. And you can see we're going around with a screener, just like you would also see on a baseball field, and we're screening the whole thing, and then we actually roll it with a roller, just like a normal sod roller, so we don't accidentally pack it too much and make little shelves. Once we had our base figured out, then it was fun to start making some real progress on the green. You can see now Drew and myself were actually working on the golf holes. We didn't do this, or we didn't plan on doing this. We originally planned on just putting putting green holes into the base. But experts told us, you know what, you should really add a sleeve. So that's what we did. We actually bought these metal sleeves that we put in. You can see it here. We dig our holes, we put a sleeve in, and then we just pop the hole in, which is really sweet. So look for a sleeve. Another thing that we didn't plan on doing going into this project is installing a pad. And this is what we did here. They wanted to hit some shots. They wanted to add a tee box, so that's what we did. But we want to make sure there was a pad so there weren't any divots that would occur in our base if you were hitting a ball at it. So this pad actually helps with divots, actually protects your base, and it makes for a smoother roll underneath your putting surface. One thing we did learn is this stuff settles slower than the putting green. So you'll see in the final montage, there's a couple of creases, and that's because our pad has not settled yet. Eventually it'll be perfectly smooth, but it's gonna need like a month or two to settle out. So once our pad is actually in, that's when we start installing our turf. So this is exciting. This stuff's really heavy. So this roll alone, this was a 50-foot roll by 15 feet wide. Everything comes in 15-foot rolls or 7.5-foot rolls. So this putting green surface, this is actually a Supreme putt. And that thing weighed like 300, 400 pounds. So you roll that out and it's pretty difficult to kind of slide around. So we had to slide it around and then we had to cut around the island, and we had to hope we made it just right, because if we messed up this part, man, it would have been a bummer because we would have had to ship more turf back from Arizona, and that would have been devastating. Trust me, my heart personally, as the owner of the company, it was racing because we had not done this before and I did not want to do it wrong. So once our turf was out, we were really focused on making sure we had everything done around the outside, so we wouldn't have to walk across it, roll anything on it after we actually completed the product. So you guys can see here, they're adding the rocks around the plants. Good idea by Brian. He actually covered all the plants prior to laying the rock with big old 20-gallon pots, so we can more easily just rock around the plants. You can see more steppers are going in. Pretty exciting landscape fabric under the steppers so you don't have weeds coming in. You can see us using some of that aggregate limestone for our base, kind of level those things off. And you know what? It is looking good. And at this point, we are actually making some solid progress, which we were excited about because this project was taking us forever. Big shout out to Alex from Prince Contracting. You can see him in here. He actually helped us with the seam because all of the manufacturers said that it would be impossible to hide the seam. We reached out to Alex, who also sells turf here in Minnesota. That's who we're going to use from here on out. He said, no, we can make that thing perfect. I have an idea. Let's test it. So we actually put in some seam tape. It's like seam glue. And he actually used like a carpet iron. And dang, did that turn out. It actually turned out amazing. So once we had our seams in for our putting surface, once again, Supreme Putt, we actually went and cut the outside. And then we laid our Daytona 80. Our Daytona 80 is actually, that's the Fringe. That's what we just laid right here. And you can see we actually lay that out around our putting surface, and then we make cuts. So we trace the putting surface underneath, make a rough cut, and then at that point, we actually fold our putting green over the top of our Fringe, and we make a real cut. Because, yeah, you can see here with Drew and I, we had a lot of cuts on the north side of this putting green. So we had to take little pieces every time with the Fringe, and we had to cut every little thing to precision. You could see Drew putting in some nails, and these are actually nails that we put in 1 inch apart. You're gonna see it further along in this video. They are 6-inch tile nails, so that's what we put in the Fringe, because the Fringe, that is thick. That is a thick turf. It's about 1.25 inches, so we can hide those nails no problem. We really focused on making sure all of our turf edges or our Fringe edges were put in place and we had them cut right. And then we'd focus on cutting and actually nailing the outside of the Fringe, because we want to make sure we had as much wiggle room as possible, so when we made mistakes, we could fix it. When we look at it here, you can see we're installing our last bit of Fringe around the island, and this is what I'm talking about when I talk about how hard it is to cut around natural stone. You're gonna see it coming right here. This is pretty exciting. Gosh, this is taking longer than I thought, but it is really tough because, you know, you can see all that natural stone on that island. It's jagged. It's not a straight cut at all. So when we change this camera angle, if we ever do change the angle, you can see that I'm running along every single stone. One at a time. I'm doing about 1.5 inches at a time, pulling it back, checking my line, going another 1.5 inches. I'm continuing that all the way around. So we did that both for the Chilton edging all the way around the outer edge of the turf, and we did it for the inside with the Chilton wall block on the inner island. So at this point, we have a large amount of our putting green in. We got that turf down, we got it cut. And what we actually use, we just use utility knives to cut all of this. So we are changing blades all the time. I'd say probably every 10 to 15 feet of turf I would cut, I'd probably change out a blade. So we went through a lot of blades, but trust me, without a sharp blade, it would be brutal. It would be bad. You can see once again, Brad and Drew, they're putting in more nails. A nail every inch is what they're putting in, and these are these 6-inch tile nails. Also, what you didn't see is we actually put in nails on the outside of the Supreme Putt, so the actual putting turf, and that we did with bright finish nails. So we put a whole bunch of those in because we didn't want nails in the middle of the putting green. What you're seeing last here is silica sand. This silica sand is very fine, 30 grit. We put in 2,000 pounds on the Supreme Putt turf, and then we put in another 1,800 pounds on the putting green just to weigh everything down, and that's actually what allows it to roll well, and it makes sure that it stays in place forever and ever, so these guys have this awesome putting green forever and ever. And I honestly, this montage is awesome, but it was hard for me to even get through everything I wanted to tell you guys, so who knows? I might make another one on putting greens in the future. Ask me as many questions as you want because, well, we just did this forever and it turned out amazing. So thank you so much for watching this unique, another try at explaining landscaping episode. And I can't wait to see you next time in the next normal episode, there we go, of the Mason Gang. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.